Wednesday will mark the official opening of Parliament by King Charles. And, as is the custom, he'll give a speech outlining the government's legislative commitments for their first Parliament. Government departments are reportedly working on 35 bills to advance Labour's agenda. So, what can we expect to see in the speech? There will almost certainly be legislation to bring into existence Labour's three big ideas looking to encourage investment and growth. Those are the National Wealth Fund, Great British Energy, and the Industrial Strategy Council. The government has also briefed that the speech will contain a new AI bill, setting out regulations around how the emerging technology develops. Then there will probably be constitutional changes, like a little bit of Lords reform, not too much though, don't get worried. There's also the much touted New Deal for working people, though those promises have now been so watered down that one trade union, Unite, refused to sign up to it. But there's one piece of legislation that will be noticeably absent. That's a reversal to the two-child benefit cap. And many Labour MPs and voters aren't happy about it. On BBC Breakfast, Angela Rayner was asked this.
But some of your Labour colleagues think that you should be prioritising this policy. There's even talk this morning that some of them might put down an amendment to the Queen's speech tomorrow to try to make the government do this. What do you say to them? They're not hearing you. They think it's abhorrent and they think you should deal with it.
Well, I accept that people are frustrated and want to, change a lot of things that the Conservatives have done over the last 14 years. But our inheritance is dire. The Chancellor will set out in the coming weeks more of the situation. She's asked all departments to give them the frank information about what's happened. But we've seen unfunded commitments. We've seen the situation, the crisis in our prisons. So we have inherited a really difficult situation. But all I would say is look at what Labour's history and what we do when we're in government. And, as someone who grew up in poverty, I am not prepared to leave office, after a Labour government where we haven't made those significant changes. And child poverty is an issue for us. And we're absolutely appalled that children haven't got beds to sleep in at night. This is the 21st century. This shouldn't be the situation we're in, but this is the inheritance that the Conservatives have left us, and we will continue to tackle those issues.
Angela Rayner would like to see the benefit cap gone by the end of a Labour government, but that's probably more than a decade away. And to give you a sense of the damage the legislation continues to do to children in this country, the Child Poverty Action Group has published a new study containing testimony from families crushed by it. This is really extraordinary. A single parent with 3 children told the study this. I can no longer afford to pay for necessities such as clothes, food and household bills. I cannot pay for school trips or any activities my children would like to take part in. The benefit cap has affected my and my children's lives in an extremely negative way. I pray every day that the cap will be lifted so that my children can enjoy the same experiences other children their age do. Elsewhere, a working couple with 4 children said this. My number one reason for doing anything is my children, yet when I watch them queuing in a food bank with me because I physically can't provide for them, I feel horrific. It makes you feel like an absolute failure. And a single mother with 4 children told the report this. I can't work as I'm disabled. My children's father died suddenly, so I've had to claim benefits for my 3 children. I don't get any benefits for my youngest child, and so it's hard to budget as little ones grow so quickly and do cost money. Money is tight. Apparently that stuff doesn't matter. I mean, at least Angela Rayner is pretending to care about it. I'm sure she does care about it. But this stuff apparently was cheered on by much of the political class, let's be honest, for 10 years. Helena, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because I do believe Angela Rayner's sincerity in when she says, I want to bring child poverty down. I don't dispute that for one moment. But that message of we can't afford to do anything about it is so much more digestible when it's coming from the mouth of somebody who says, I've experienced child poverty firsthand, than from somebody that looks, sounds, and has the experience of Jeremy Hunt or George Osborne. What's your view?
I mean, the issue, of course, is that it's just a choice that they've made. It's not something that they can't do. It's something that they won't do. It's very deliberate. We just saw bond yields, 2-year bond yields have just gone below 4% yields today. And so the idea that the Labour economy that they've inherited is still crashed from Liz Truss is completely nonsensical, right? This kind of blaming of the inheritance just won't wash as far as I'm concerned. But you're right. It does seem far more digestible from somebody essentially kind of I hate to say betraying her own communities, because these are the people who are going to be most affected by it. And she was somebody who needed the help of the welfare state, quite rightly, that it was given to her when she was a single mother at 16. So to see her essentially be the one kind of wheeled out by the Labour leadership to defend this, to defend what is in utilitarian terms an indefensible policy is pretty disheartening to be able to see. The issue, of course, is that they're not doing this because they think that it's good. They're doing it because they think that it is an optical win for them. So no matter how many times you try and tell people about why that this cap should go, it's good for overall economic growth if more people are spending money in the economy, especially those who wouldn't otherwise be consuming because they're destitute. It would reduce poverty, which is good kind of prima facie. It would be cheaper in the long run. We wouldn't have to deal with the afterward health effects of having a poor childhood. We'd have a more productive economy later by having better educated children. Well-fed children are much easier to educate. Every single study shows this. But you can say this as much as you want, but the people that this policy is meant to appeal to don't care. I was watching a debate on Channel 5. It was Michael Walker versus Esther Crackey talking about this. And it really got me thinking about the ways in which you can't really argue with the supporters of this policy, because they have a different, complete idea about what the role of policy is for. Us here over on the left, we usually think of policy in utilitarian terms. We say, what utility does this policy solve? Does this policy do? And if it doesn't create a positive utility, we should get rid of the policy. That's how we've kind of looked at the two-child benefit cap in terms of growth, in terms of human outcomes, in terms of overall funding for the exchequer, for example. And we've just come to that conclusion, said that it's bad. But for a lot of people on the political right, or more conservative, even if they're not necessarily kind of right-wing economically, more broadly in terms of the structure of the economy, the policies and the laws and the way that the government makes our structure of society works isn't about utility. It's about morality. It's a legislation of morality. And so something like the two-child benefit cap, they'll say things like, well, we shouldn't be permissive of the idea that somebody should have a third child and expect the state to cover it. So this would be a disincentive, for example. But the same Child Poverty Action Group reporting on the two-child benefit cap has shown it's not really led to that much of a disfertility effect at all. It's not actually stopping people having the children, which, by the way, we need. We have a declining birth rate. People need to have children in this country to keep our economy and our society afloat. They're trying to disincentivize that, and it's not even working anyway. All they're doing is creating more child poverty. But unless you can get round that kind of philosophical disagreement between the left and the right's view of this particular policy, we can scream until we're blue in the face about the evidence, but it just won't wash with them, because at the end of the day, they'll either say, well, it doesn't matter to me, I don't want them to be permissive, or a caller to this particular show I watched said things like, oh, well, that's just because, the people, for the parents, are spending money on these frivolous things that aren't necessary, like the latest gadgets or Sky TV or Netflix or whatever. And of course, I'm sure that the 30% of this country's children that are in poverty, their parents all just immediately decided in unison in a little WhatsApp chat to decide to not feed their children as soon as the Conservative government took power in 2010. But that's by the by. And you see this on loads of other different policies, like with drug reform. I don't want the state to be permissive of the usage of drugs, even though decriminalisation has been shown in countries like Portugal to have much better societal outcomes. And that is unfortunately a philosophical disagreement that we're not going to be able to get round. And the Labour Party have decided they don't want to have a fight over, and they're just going to acquiesce to it, even though they know that it's bad.
That's exactly right. And I think that people talk about the costs of paying for this is about £2.5 billion a year. The costs of not doing it are just massive. And getting to your point about low birth rates, Helena, many people would like more children. They simply can't afford it for a bunch of reasons. But imagine if you're a woman in your 30s, you've had one child. By the way, it's really hard work. I say that as a dad of an 8-month-old. Really hard work. And your partner is saying, let's have a second or let's have a third. Well, and if you rent, you think, well, if you're not around in 5 years, God willing, something doesn't happen to you. But if it does, and we go for a third child, I'm not going to do it because I know the state isn't going to have my back. I would be immiserated. Just such an awful policy. And just to repeat, many of the people in receipt of these policies, in receipt of what they should get, and they're not getting, it's been pulled, these are working households. Child poverty is such a huge issue in this country. And I was actually looking at some of the national data. Somewhere like Hastings or Southampton, 35% of kids are being raised in poverty. It's not just, the West Midlands, bits of London. It's pretty much the whole country has a major problem with child poverty. Any city has massive issues with child poverty. And it's like we're not even taking it seriously. And it's storing up such extraordinary problems for decades.